The courtroom was silent, so quiet you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. A teenage boy stood trembling in front of the judge, his hands cuffed, his eyes filled with fear. He was just 17, accused of a crime so serious, the entire town was watching. The judge, stern and unblinking, looked down at him and delivered the sentence, life in prison. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The boy's lips parted, but no words came. Everyone thought it was over, case closed. But what happened next turned the entire story upside down. This wasn't just any teenager, and the judge had no idea who he was really sentencing. Moments after the verdict, the teen asked for one last phone call. Shaking, he dialed a number and waited. The person who answered, his father, the United States Attorney General. That's right, the top legal authority in the country. What happened on that call would send shockwaves, not just through the courtroom, but through the entire justice system. People who thought they were untouchable suddenly found themselves under a spotlight. But let's rewind. How did this even happen? How could an innocent teenager be sentenced to life in prison without solid evidence? Why didn't anyone speak up for him? Was it just a case of mistaken identity, or was something more sinister going on behind the scenes? And most importantly, how did no one realize who his father was until it was too late? In this story, we'll uncover the hidden truths behind this shocking courtroom drama. We'll walk through the trial, piece together the events that led up to the conviction, and expose the secrets that almost destroyed a young life. But right now, just as the gavel falls and the sentence is read, the only thing anyone can feel is the weight of silence until the phone rings. What his father says next will leave you speechless. You won't believe how this story unfolds. Stay tuned, because the real twist is just beginning. Before the courtroom drama reached its boiling point, the teen, whose name is Jordan, was just an ordinary high school student. He loved music, hung out with friends, and stayed out of trouble. He wasn't perfect, but he definitely wasn't a criminal. So when he was arrested in connection with a robbery that ended in violence, no one, especially not his family, could believe it. Jordan said he was at home when it all happened, playing video games with his cousin. But the police claimed a witness had identified him. Just like that, everything in his life flipped upside down. The trial moved fast, too fast. The defense attorney was assigned at the last minute and didn't seem to take the case seriously. Evidence that could have proven Jordan's innocence, like phone records, surveillance footage, even his cousin's statement, was never properly presented in court. And the prosecution, they made Jordan look like a dangerous threat, using one blurry photo and a statement that didn't even match his description. Still, the jury was convinced. Or maybe they just wanted to be done with it. Within days, Jordan was found guilty. Now here's where things get even more strange. Jordan never told anyone who his father was, not his lawyer, not the court, not even his closest friends. He never used his last name publicly and always went by just Jordan. His father, the U.S. Attorney General, had kept his family life extremely private to protect them. But when Jordan heard the judge say life, he knew staying silent wasn't an option anymore. The phone call he made after sentencing wasn't emotional. It was calm, quiet, controlled. He simply said, "Dad, it happened." And on the other end, a powerful voice replied, "I'm on my way." That was all. But the second that call ended, everything began to shift. Guards exchanged glances. The judge paused. Something wasn't adding up. What no one knew was that this case was about to explode into something much bigger. Bigger than a wrongful conviction. Bigger than one courtroom. There were people behind the scenes who wanted this verdict, and they never expected Jordan's father to walk through that door. What happens next will change everything. By the next morning, word had started to spread, quiet whispers that the teen sentenced to life was no ordinary defendant. The judge, now aware of who Jordan's father really was, started second-guessing everything. The police department went on lockdown, and files that were once open to the public started disappearing from databases. But it was already too late to hide the cracks. The Attorney General's team had arrived in town, and they were digging deep. Jordan sat alone in his cell, still in shock. His mind kept racing through the trial, replaying every moment. The ignored alibi, the missing footage, the feeling that the jury had made up their minds before he even took the stand. But now, something deeper started to bother him. Memories of strange looks from people in town, awkward silences when he walked into certain places. It was like someone had been setting him up long before the arrest. He just hadn't seen it. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, his father was pulling every legal string he could. But even with all his power, the case was messier than expected. Someone had intentionally kept him in the dark, pushing the trial forward without giving him time to intervene. That wasn't just an oversight, that was planned. As he read through court transcripts and police reports, inconsistencies kept jumping out. The timeline didn't make sense. Key pieces of evidence were ignored, and that eyewitness who claimed Jordan was at the scene. Turns out, their story had changed, twice. Then there was the judge. Under pressure, he began to recall details he'd overlooked. The lead detective on the case had rushed the investigation. The DA's office seemed eager, too eager, to get a conviction. And when the judge started asking questions, people stopped answering their phones. But this wasn't just about Jordan anymore. As his father looked deeper, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Other teens, mostly from the same side of town as Jordan, had faced similar fates. Fast trials, questionable evidence, harsh sentences. It wasn't random. Something systematic was happening, and Jordan's case had accidentally pulled the curtain back. And now, someone wanted that curtain closed, fast. Because the more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Jordan was never supposed to walk free. Storm clouds gathered, both outside and inside the courthouse. Jordan's case was no longer just a local matter. Media vans parked outside. Reporters hovered near the steps, asking questions no one was ready to answer. Cameras flashed every time the Attorney General entered or left the building, his face tight with focus. But behind the scenes, the tension was boiling over. Jordan had been moved to a more secure holding cell, but not for his safety, at least not entirely. There were rumors that someone inside the system didn't want the truth getting out, that if Jordan stayed in too long, something might happen. Even his father started to realize this was more dangerous than he thought. Someone powerful wanted this case buried, and they were willing to cross any line to do it. New documents began to surface, leaked files, anonymous tips. One revealed that the so-called eyewitness had been offered a deal on unrelated charges just days before testifying. Another showed that the surveillance video from the night of the robbery had been edited before being submitted as evidence. The original footage was missing, disappeared, erased. That's when the Attorney General stopped playing nice. He filed an emergency motion with the federal court, demanding a full investigation. But even then, resistance came from unexpected places. One official refused to sign off. Another suddenly took a leave of absence. A key detective vanished from contact. It was like pieces of the system were falling apart or hiding something. This wasn't just about corruption anymore. It felt like a cover-up with deep roots. Jordan, still locked away, could only imagine what was happening outside. He hadn't spoken to his father since the call, but every guard's glance, every delayed meal, every shuffled footstep outside his door, it all sent a message. Someone was watching, and they weren't on his side. Then came the moment no one expected. A sealed envelope was delivered to the courthouse. No name, no return address. Inside, a single flash drive. Security took it straight to the Attorney General. He plugged it in. What he saw on that screen made his blood run cold. It was the missing footage, and it showed something no one was prepared for. What was on that tape would change everything. The footage on the flash drive started with shaky camera angles and poor lighting, but within seconds it became clear. Jordan wasn't at the scene of the robbery. In fact, the person caught on camera looked nothing like him. Different height, different build. But what made the Attorney General's hands clench tighter wasn't just the proof of his son's innocence. It was who was in the video. A familiar face. One that had been sitting in the courtroom every single day of the trial. A junior prosecutor from the DA's office, present at every hearing, nodding along with every argument made against Jordan. The footage clearly showed him outside the convenience store, speaking with the man who would later be labeled the eyewitness. And the timestamp, just minutes before the crime occurred. What were they doing there? Why had none of this been mentioned in court? This wasn't just a mistake. It looked like someone inside the system had intentionally steered the entire case in the wrong direction. The Attorney General slammed his laptop shut and called for a federal marshal. No more slow steps. This had gone beyond Jordan. It was now a full-scale operation to uncover who was pulling strings from the inside. But just as his team began making moves, something unexpected happened. Jordan was gone. That morning, when his father sent someone to check on him, the cell was empty. Guards said there had been an unrecorded transfer, but no one had signed off on it. No paperwork, no camera footage, nothing. It was as if he'd vanished. Panic hit the courthouse like a wave. His father was now racing against time, trying to track down his own son while battling a system unraveling at the seams. And then came the second twist, an anonymous call. A disguised voice on the line said, "You weren't supposed to see that video. Your son is leverage. If you keep pushing, he won't make it back." This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal. It was dangerous. And for the first time, the Attorney General realized he wasn't the one in control. What was once a courtroom case had just turned into a full-blown conspiracy, and Jordan's life still hung in the balance. The race to find Jordan became a nationwide manhunt. The Attorney General, once the corn force behind the country's justice system, was now a desperate father using every resource he had. Satellite tracking, surveillance teams, tapped phone lines, he activated everything. And finally, a lead came in. A black van matching the prison transport's description was spotted pulling into an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, miles from any official facility. Federal agents swarmed the area within minutes. Inside, they found Jordan, shaken, bruised but alive. He'd been held in a makeshift cell, guarded by off-the-books security hired through shell companies. It wasn't a rogue move by a few officers. It was bigger. A network of officials who had been using the justice system to traffic influence, control outcomes, and bury threats. Jordan had gotten caught in their trap because someone thought using him as leverage would stop the Attorney General from getting too close to the truth. But they underestimated a father's fight. With Jordan safe, the Attorney General went public. He held a live press conference, laying out everything: corrupt prosecutors, fake evidence, tampered footage, and the attempt to silence his son. The courtroom that once sentenced Jordan became the setting for mass indictments. Arrests were made. Names that once carried weight were now headlines for all the wrong reasons. And just when it seemed like everything was over, the final twist came. Jordan, quiet through most of the chaos, asked his father something simple. "Why me?" That's when the truth came out. Jordan hadn't been targeted at random. Years earlier, his father had investigated a private contractor tied to the same corrupt group. Jordan's name had surfaced during background checks. He was flagged, not because he did anything, but because he could be used one day. It was all premeditated. The entire trial, the false charges, even the edited footage, it had been part of a long game of revenge. Jordan was never supposed to survive it. But he did. And as father and son stood outside that courthouse, free at last, the crowd cheered. Justice had finally been served, but the message was clear. The system almost won, and it could try again. So Jordan looked into the cameras, steady and unshaken, and said, "I'm not the victim. I'm the warning." In the weeks that followed, the fallout was massive. Investigations spread to multiple states, and dozens of officials were either fired, arrested, or forced to resign. The courtroom that once condemned Jordan now stood as a symbol of what could happen when power is left unchecked. News outlets across the country covered the story, using headlines like *innocent teen framed, system exposed and attorney general's son becomes face of justice reform. But for Jordan, none of it changed what he'd been through. The long nights in a cell, the fear, the betrayal, the feeling of being completely alone. Still, he chose to speak out, not just once, but many times. He began visiting schools, youth centers, and community groups, sharing his story, not for sympathy, but to raise awareness. He reminded people that justice isn't automatic. It has to be fought for, protected, and demanded. His voice became a powerful symbol of hope for those who had been wrongfully accused or overlooked by the system. And while his father returned to his post, he also began pushing for sweeping changes: federal oversight, mandatory body cam reviews, protection for whistleblowers, and better access to legal representation for underprivileged defendants. As for Jordan, he never went back to being the same person. How could he? But he did find purpose in what happened. The trauma didn't define him, it fueled him. The boy who once stood in silence before a judge now stood confidently before crowds, reminding them that truth will always find its way out, even when people try to bury it. The case became a blueprint for reform, and while not every part of the system was fixed, it sparked a movement, one that keeps growing. So if you're watching this, remember Jordan's story isn't just about corruption or a twist of fate. It's about resilience. It's about how quickly justice can go wrong when no one's paying attention, and how powerful it can be when someone finally does. Because in the end, Jordan wasn't just the kid who got wrongly sentenced. He became the reason others won't be. And that's a twist no one saw coming.